The Rolls-Royce arrived on a Wednesday morning, hauled in on a flatbed with a note taped to the windshield that read, "Do not attempt to start. Awaiting specialist." Owen Marsh read the note twice, folded it, and set it on his workbench. He already knew who the car belonged to. Everyone in Harwick did. Katherine Voss was not the kind of woman whose name you forgot. She was 43, the founder and CEO of Voss Capital Group, a private equity firm headquartered in Boston with satellite offices in 3 other cities. She had grown up in Harwick, or more precisely, she had grown up in the large colonial house on the hill above Harwick, and she returned twice a year, usually to check on the property manager who maintained her childhood home and to be photographed at the annual harbor fundraiser. She did not stay long. She never had, even before she had money. The Rolls was a Phantom 8, midnight blue, the kind of car that made people slow down when they drove past it. It had been sitting in the Voss garage for 11 days before anyone thought to bring it to Owen's shop, and by that point, 4 different mechanics had looked at it. 2 from Boston, 1 flown in from New York, and 1 certified Rolls-Royce technician who had driven up from Providence with a proprietary diagnostic system that cost more than Owen's truck. None of them had figured out what was wrong with it. Owen didn't say anything about that when the flatbed driver left the car in his lot. He just walked around it slowly, the way he always walked around a car he hadn't met yet. Hands in his jacket pockets, eyes moving from the roofline to the wheel wells to the undercarriage. His daughter Nora was watching from the shop window. She was 9, and she had opinions about most things, including cars, because when your father is the only person you spend most of your time with, you develop opinions about the things he cares about. "It's pretty," she said through the glass. Owen said. "Is it expensive?" "Yes." "How expensive?" "More than this building." Nora considered that for a moment, then went back to her homework. Owen had been running Marsh Garage for 6 years. Before that, he had spent 12 years at a powertrain engineering division of a major automotive manufacturer in Detroit, working on diagnostic systems and fault detection for high-performance vehicles. He had patents, he had publications and trade journals that no one outside the industry read. He had a corner office and a team of 7 engineers who reported to him and a parking space with his name on it. Then his wife Gail died of a brain aneurysm on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and the life he had been building in Detroit stopped making sense. He moved back to Harwick, where he had grown up, because his mother was there and because he needed somewhere to put Nora that felt like solid ground. He bought the garage from a retiring mechanic named Orville, who had worked on American muscle cars for 40 years and didn't trust anything with more than 1 screen in the dashboard. Owen fixed the roof, replaced the lifts, and quietly built a reputation as someone who could figure out what was wrong with a car when no one else could. He did not advertise this. He did not need to. The calls came anyway. He didn't open the Phantom's hood that first day. He sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes with the door open and the key in his hand, not starting it, just listening to the silence and reading the interior the way you'd read a room after something had happened in it. The leather was impeccable. The wood trim was hand-fitted. The dashboard was clean. No coffee rings, no smudges on the screens. Someone had taken care of this car or had paid people to take care of it. He set the key in the ignition but didn't turn it. He just sat there. Nora knocked on the window after a while. "Are you okay?" "Thinking," he said. "About the car?" "About the car." She nodded seriously and went back inside. Katherine Voss arrived at the garage the next morning at 7:15. She drove herself in a rented Audi, which Owen found interesting. She was dressed in what he recognized, from his years in corporate life, as the specific kind of casual that costs more than formal. Dark jeans, a structured blazer, leather boots that had never seen rain. She wore no jewelry except a watch that Owen didn't look at long enough to identify. Her assistant, a young man named Terrence, who had the look of someone running on 4 hours of sleep and ambition, stayed by the rental car with a tablet and a phone and the expression of someone waiting for a request. Katherine walked to where Owen was standing by the Phantom and stopped about 4 feet away. "You're Owen Marsh," she said. "Yes. Patrick Ory said you're the best diagnostic mechanic in New England." Owen knew Patrick Ory. He was a car collector in Portsmouth who had brought Owen a Ferrari with an intermittent misfire that 4 other shops had given up on. Owen had found a fractured injector O-ring that was only failing under sustained high RPM loads. It had taken him 2 days in a cold garage and the patience to replicate exactly the conditions under which the failure occurred. "Patrick's generous," Owen said. "He said you were modest, too." She looked at the Phantom. "I've had 4 specialists look at this car. I've spent more than I'd like to say, and I've been without it for almost 2 weeks. Do you know anything about Rolls-Royce systems?" "Some," Owen said. She turned and looked at him directly, the way people look at someone when they're deciding whether to believe them. "What does some mean?" "It means enough," he said. "Can I ask you something first?" She looked slightly surprised, which told him she was not often the one being asked questions. "Go ahead." "Where was it garage before it stopped starting?" "Here, in the Voss house garage." "Heated?" She paused. "No, the heating system in the carriage house has been broken since March. The property manager was supposed to fix it. A brief flicker of something, irritation, or maybe something older than irritation. He didn't." Owen nodded and didn't say anything else. He wrote something in the small notebook he kept in his chest pocket. Katherine watched him. "That matters?" "Might," he said. He didn't call her that day, or the next. He worked on the Phantom in the mornings, before Nora woke up, and needed breakfast, and a ride to school, and again in the evenings after she was in bed. The car had been diagnosed by the previous specialists as having an ECU fault. The engine control unit, the brain of the vehicle, which managed everything from fuel delivery to ignition timing. 2 of them had recommended replacing it. The cost of a replacement ECU for a Phantom 8, Owen knew, was approximately $40,000. The labor to install and calibrate it was on top of that. He did not think it was the ECU. He thought about the unheated garage. He thought about the winter they'd had. February had been brutal, temperatures dropping into the single digits for weeks at a stretch. He thought about what cold does to materials that are engineered to precise tolerances. Metal contracts. Clearances close. Things that work fine at 60 degrees stop working at 10. He pulled the wiring harness diagnostic on the 3rd day. The Phantom's electrical system was, by any standard, extraordinarily complex. 17 separate control modules. Hundreds of individual circuits, more than 2 miles of wiring in total. The factory diagnostic read everything as nominal. No fault codes, no flags. Owen didn't trust factory diagnostics. He tested each section of the harness manually, section by section, the way his first mentor in Detroit, a gruff, largely silent engineer named Darby, who had forgotten more about automotive electrical systems than most people ever learned, had taught him. "You verify with your hands," Darby used to say. "The machine tells you what it was built to look for. Your hands tell you what nobody thought to look for." On the 4th morning, in the section of the harness that ran along the firewall near the driver's side footwell, Owen found a connection that read correctly at room temperature and failed. Intermittently, microscopically, but definitively, when he chilled it with a can of freeze spray. The connector had been stressed, probably during a previous service, and the internal contact had developed a hairline separation. At normal temperatures, the metal expanded just enough to maintain conductivity. In a cold garage over a cold winter, the metal contracted, the contact opened, and the car's ignition circuit lost continuity. Not completely, not consistently, but enough. The ECU, finding an inconsistent signal, did what it was programmed to do. It shut everything down to prevent damage. The car wasn't broken. It was protecting itself from a problem no one had been cold enough, or patient enough, or stubborn enough to find. Owen replaced the connector. It took 40 minutes. He sat in the driver's seat, put the key in the ignition, and turned it. The Phantom started on the first try. The engine sound was, and Owen had spent his career around engines, had heard thousands of them. Remarkable. Not loud. Not aggressive. It was the sound of something very large and very powerful choosing deliberately to be quiet about it. He sat there for a moment with the engine running and the garage warm and the car thrumming beneath him like something that had decided, finally, to come back. Nora appeared in the doorway between the garage and the office. Her eyes went wide. "You fixed it," she said. "It fixed itself," Owen said. "I just found the right conditions." She came and stood beside the open door and looked at the dashboard lights and the engine readout on the screen. "Can we ride in it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it belongs to someone else." Nora thought about this. Would she know? "I'd know," Owen said. She considered that for a moment. Then she nodded, very seriously, and went back inside. He called Katherine Voss at 8 o'clock that morning. She picked up on the second ring. "It's running," he said. There was a pause on the line that lasted long enough that he wondered if the call had dropped. Then, "I'm sorry?" "The Phantom. It's running. You can come pick it up when you'd like." Another pause. "What was wrong with it?" he told her. He explained the connector, the cold, the physics of metal contracting under temperature stress. He explained why the factory diagnostic hadn't caught it. Because the diagnostic checked for faults at operating temperature, and the fault only existed in the cold. He explained why the ECU wasn't failing. It was responding correctly to an incorrect signal, which was exactly what it was designed to do. He told her that whoever had serviced the harness previously had probably stressed the connector during reinstallation, probably years ago. The failure had been building slowly ever since, and this winter had been the one that finally pushed it over the threshold. Katherine was quiet for a moment after he finished. Then she said, "The ECU replacement had already been scheduled. The parts are on order from Rolls-Royce." "Cancel it," Owen said. "Just like that. The ECU isn't the problem. Replacing it won't change anything." A longer pause. "4 specialists told me it was the ECU. 4 specialists tested it at room temperature," Owen said. "In a warm shop with warm hands reading a diagnostic that showed no fault codes. You wouldn't find a cold soak intermittent failure that way. You'd need to think about where the car had been sitting, and what the temperatures had been, and what that does to materials over time." He paused. "You'd need to think about the unheated garage." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said quietly, "How long have you known?" "Since you told me about the heating system," he said. "I didn't know for certain until I tested it, but I knew it was the direction." She came to the garage that afternoon, alone this time. No Terrence, no tablet. She was dressed differently. A regular jacket, jeans that actually had a worn spot on the knee, boots with dried mud on the toe. She looked, for the first time since Owen had met her, like someone who had grown up in a small New England town rather than someone who was visiting one. She walked around the Phantom slowly, the way Owen had walked around it when it first arrived. She ran her hand along the fender. She looked at the engine bay, which Owen had left open, the replaced connector, visible in the wiring harness with a new piece of black electrical tape marking the section he'd worked on. Not because it needed marking, but because he always marked his work, so anyone who looked later would know exactly where to start. The other mechanics, she said, were they wrong, or were they just not looking in the right place? "Both," Owen said. "They weren't wrong to suspect the ECU. Phantom electrical failures often traced to the ECU. They were wrong to stop there. You didn't stop there." "No." She looked at him. "Why not?" Owen thought about Darby in the Detroit shop, hands always moving, always touching, always testing. He thought about Gail, who had always said that he never stopped pulling at a loose thread, even when other people would have tied it off and moved on. He thought about Nora at the garage window, watching him walk around a car he didn't understand yet, waiting for him to understand it. "Because the car was telling me something different than the diagnostic was," he said. "You just have to know how to listen." Katherine stood by the front fender and was quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology," she said. Owen looked at her. "For what?" "When Terrence called to arrange bringing the car here, he told me this was." She paused, and there was something in the pause that wasn't quite regret but was close to it. A last resort. He meant it practically, that we'd run out of specialists to call. But I think I heard it as something else. I think I didn't expect. She stopped, started again. "I think I came here expecting to be disappointed." "That's all right," Owen said. "It isn't, actually." She said it without drama, without the careful self-awareness of someone who had rehearsed the moment. She said it the way you say something when you've worked something out for yourself and you're not entirely comfortable with what you found. "I drove past this garage 10 times growing up. I never thought anything in here would matter to me." Owen didn't say anything. There was nothing particularly useful to say. She looked at the Phantom for another moment, then looked at him. "What do I owe you?" He quoted her his rate. Labor plus the connector, which had cost him $7.40 from a parts supplier he'd been using for years. She stared at him. "That's everything?" "That's everything. The other specialists charged." "I know what the other specialists charged," Owen said. "I'm not them." She looked at him for a long moment, then she reached into her jacket and took out a business card and held it out to him. He took it. "If you ever want to work at a scale that matches what you can actually do," she said, "call me." Owen put the card in his pocket. He didn't say yes, and he didn't say no. He wasn't sure yet what he thought. Harwick was small, and the garage was small, and the work was quiet, and there were mornings when the smallness felt like failure, and mornings when it felt like the most deliberate choice he'd ever made. He held the door of the Phantom open for her the way he'd been taught, the way his own father had taught him. Things should be done, even if no one was watching. She got in. The seat adjusted automatically, the way the Phantom's memory seat does when it recognizes a key. The engine started without hesitation. She rolled down the window. "The girl who was from the office window earlier," she said. "Is she yours?" "Yes," Owen said. "She looks like she's paying attention." "She always is," Owen said. "It's her best quality, and her most inconvenient one." Katherine almost smiled. It was the first genuine thing he'd seen on her face since she arrived. She pulled forward slowly, out of the bay and into the lot, and then onto the street, the Phantom moving with that particular quiet authority that well-made things have when they're finally allowed to do what they were built for. Owen watched it go. Behind him, the office door opened. "Did she like it?" Nora asked. "The car? That you fixed it?" Owen thought about this. "I think she was surprised," he said. Nora leaned against the doorframe. "Why do people act surprised when you fix things? You always fix things." It was not a complicated question. It was the kind of question that only sounds simple until you try to answer it honestly. "Because," Owen said, "sometimes people decide what a thing is worth before they look at it, and then it takes a while to see past that." Nora was quiet for a moment, turning this over. "That seems inefficient," she said. "It is," Owen said. "Come on, I'll make dinner." She followed him in, and he pulled the garage door down behind them, and the lot was empty and still. And the space where the Phantom had sat was already just a patch of clean concrete, as though it had never been there at all. Except that Owen had found the thing that everyone else had missed, and the car was running. And some things, once fixed, stay fixed, and that was enough.